Welcome to the Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs series, where Natasha discusses psychedelic-assisted therapy within high-demand religious context of sexual and religious trauma. Natasha is joined by Rossi and Aimee Heffernan. Note that neither Natasha or the Amies are doctors. They do not condone illegal behavior. Please make sure you know your local and state laws before using psychedelics. Go to learnreligiontherapy.com for upcoming CE information. Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her core resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
Welcome everyone to the Natasha Helfer Podcast series, Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs, with my two friends and colleagues, Aimee Heffernan and Aimee Rossi, where we talk about psychedelics, sex, and religion. I mean, can it get more fun than that? We would love to hear your comments and questions, so feel free to share in the threads. We'll address them either tonight or live in future episodes. Aimee Rossi, do you want to give some disclaimers?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we just want to give a quick little reminder that we do not condone illegal activity, and we are not attorneys, we're not doctors, we are not your personal therapist. Please be aware of the state laws where you are, and of course the federal laws as well. So please make smart decisions. We are here to educate and have discussions about these molecules and in all the different ways. So thanks for joining us. And yeah, Aim.
Well, before I even take it over to Aim,
Okay.
So today is September 10th of 2025. And so before we dive into our topics tonight, we'd like to pause and acknowledge that there were some tragic shootings that occurred today. There was a fatal attack on Charlie Kirk at a public campus right here at Utah Valley University, which I believe the three of us are actually very closely tied to. I went to Utah Valley myself back in the day, and I know many people who either work there or go there or have kids who go there. And there was also a school shooting at Evergreen High School in Colorado. So it's just a very sober time when we have so much gun violence happening in our country. And this has been, unfortunately, a pattern for a long time. And these kinds of violent events can trigger, of course, a lot of fears around safety, belonging, power, and even shame. So we just want to say that our heart goes out to all of those who are affected. And we are going to continue with our topic, but we at least wanted to acknowledge that. So, okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Aimee Heff.
Wow. Okay. Well, I guess I get to just say thanks for all of that, Natasha, and I echo everything you said. And so, as we talk today, it'll be fun to just be able to say, like, hey, like, honoring free speech and being able to, like, how grateful it is that we get to say the things we get to say. And I just want to honor that. So today we are going to be doing, diving in a little bit. Welcome to Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs. You might remember us. We've been on this podcast a couple times now. Thanks for joining in again. If people are watching live, please, like, make some comments, have some questions. Like, we love some live spontaneous interaction with, you know, the audience here on Facebook, it sounds like, right? And so we said, what are we going to talk about today? And we have decided that what would be a really fun topic, the three of us love to talk about, as we know, psychedelics, and we love to talk about high demand religion, and we love to talk about sexuality. And so the three of us love those things. So we said, why not tonight kind of do that Venn diagram of high demand religion and psychedelics? And so over the course of us doing these episodes, we've had a couple questions related to these specifically. And so, Aimee, the first question that we had from like the viewers, maybe like let's like put that out as like the beginning question, and then the three of us can kind of talk about our opinions around that question. What do you think about that, y'all?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. What was that first question then?
Yes. Okay. So the first question was, how do you reconcile using psychedelics when many religious teachings call them dangerous or sinful? Yeah. Who wants to start? Any thoughts?
Who doesn't have thoughts about this? I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that, and I'm going to try to say this respectfully for anybody's belief systems, but I do think that most belief systems want to have authority over truth. And so when you have different religions saying this is the one way that you can have, in particular, mystical or supernatural experiences, and it has to be seen through this lens, then anything else that could potentially challenge that is usually seen as bad or sinful or dangerous or scary or demonic, if we're going to look at Christianity's kind of teachings. And so you can see this a lot with lots of things, like even like witchcraft, which is a lot of people, when they think about that, they think of scary, demonic type of things, when in reality it was founded on herbs, like floral, like flora type of, connections with the world or the earth. I mean, you have, I think, a lot of suspicion over even things like yoga or Eastern types of cultures or religions. You have a lot of suspicion for indigenous, like beatings of drums or, like different chants or things, anything that feels foreign or difficult and has a spiritual component to it that you're not particularly familiar with seems strange. Now, granted, since we come from Christian culture ourselves, the three of us, I'm guessing if you come from a different culture, the whole Christian story probably sounds pretty loony and weird and strange and even maybe scary to people who are not immersed in it. And so I think that psychedelics get caught up in all of that. Especially when you have something that does affect your ability to be in your body differently than normal, which is already, I think, something that people are a little nervous about, especially since we just came off like 30 or 40 years of the war on drugs and all the scary kind of, I'll say, propaganda and also, real education around it. So that there's both. So those are my initial thoughts.
Okay. Love that. Aimee, do you want to put some initial thoughts in?
Yeah, I'll put some initial thoughts in. So what I want to say is, even in the last 10 years, the psychedelic landscape has really shifted, right? I'm sure you guys are aware of that. It, like 10 years ago when I first got into this space, I mean, maybe there was a show on Netflix. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, like there was articles here and there, but things were very, very underground. And there wasn't a lot in the mainstream yet. And now you can turn on Netflix and there's a number of shows about psychedelics, right? It's the main topic of like even drama shows now. Like there was that one on Hulu that was all about that psychedelic retreat. I forget the name of it, right?
Nine Strangers.
Yes, Nine Perfect Strangers, right? So what I want to say is psychedelics are moving into the zeitgeist. There's, reputable, magazines, news articles written about them. So I think the research is coming out that these medicines are incredible. They're different than traditional prescription meds, but they have wonderful potentiality for healing and awakening, right? And I think that is making its way into just the general zeitgeist culture, right? And so as somebody who sat with many, many individuals, I've sat with hundreds of card-carrying Mormons, right? And it was always strange for me at first when I sat with a card-carrying Mormon. I'm like, okay, you're a different kind of Mormon than I was when I was Mormon. I don't think I would have had the courage or maybe it's not courage. Maybe my mental health wasn't there. Sometimes by the time people come to work with me, I'm usually the last stop, right? And so I often ask them, so talk to me. This is a conversation I have with every card-carrying Mormon. And I've sat with I've sat with Hasidic, traditional Jewish individuals, really intense Catholics, right? I've sat with all sorts of different kinds of religious, but of course more Mormons. And what I'm hearing consistently is, I like to have this conversation because I don't want somebody to go in if this is a secret. Like if they're LDS, but they're card carrying Mormon and their bishop doesn't know and their husband doesn't know or their wife, and it's like a secret and nobody knows, because then what can come up is like that kind of secret, like shamey kind of energy. And so I like to say, have you talked about this with your leaders? Because technically we could probably say this is outside of the word of wisdom, right? And almost every time people say to me, yeah, my bishop knows I'm doing this. Yeah, my stake president knows I'm doing this. And I say, okay, talk to me about that conversation. And they say, I've been struggling for a long time. I've been looking for help in a lot of different ways and nothing has really worked. And so my bishop wants me to get well. And he says, yeah, give it a shot, which is so interesting and fascinating to me, because I don't know if when I was Mormon, 10 years ago or more, if a bishop would have condoned some sort of something like this, that is technically illegal, federally illegal behavior, But I think what we have in this country is a mental health epidemic in a lot of ways, psychological health. People are not well, especially after COVID. And so, yes, I think these two worlds go really well together. And I think people are really looking for ways to find relief. And so when we talk about religion and this intersection, specifically with Mormons, they're making it work. And it's surprising and also fascinating to me. I'm interested and I'm here for it. I think these should not be for one particular people. I don't even think that psychedelics should be only for people who have mental health issues, right? I do think they can be used for spiritual exploration, not only healing. So that's a larger conversation for another day or another question, but I think I'll stop there for now. But what I want to say is I do think that it's interesting to watch even church leaders, and maybe this doesn't move all the way up the chain. I don't exactly know. But what I do hear is like these bishops are I don't think it's easy for them to see their parishioners struggling in the way that they are. And I do think they have good hearts and they do want, relief for the members of their church and their ward. So yeah, I'll pause there for now.
Okay. Well, I do want to say little round of applause for those bishops and stake presidents that are doing the good work, because in all my years talking to bishops that are fine, that would trust me to say, this is hard. I'm like, it is hard. Yeah, it's so hard. And I love you. Thank you for what you're doing. And I agree that there are so many good bishops and stake presidents. Maybe you're listening on this little podcast. We welcome you to the conversation, sirs. And we want to say bravo to thinking outside of the box a little bit, because there's so many people in this culture that lack inner authority to be able to decide for themselves that this would be an experience that they would want for helping and healing and awakening. And so bishops being able to give permission in the way that people that lack authority need, I say, yay for those bishops. Okay. Also with cannabis too, I hear lots of in my ears, people saying that their bishops are saying, hey, if you got a medical card, we're good for it or whatever, or if it's helping you. So I'm like, yay, want to cheer those bishops. Okay. Because sometimes they get bad raps, and that's a hard job without training. So another topic for another day. So I guess my thing that I would want to add to this is just maybe just a little bit of, I don't know, as maybe from a therapist perspective of hey, I spent 15 years in a career where I use this analogy a lot, where I feel like I was in the river, with the pioneers. They talk about the crossing the rivers with, the hand carts and things. And I felt like I was sort of in the river, helping people from one side to the other, whether it was little queerdos that are go over here, or polyamory this way, or psychedelics this way. And so there was a lot of different kinds of situations that I helped cross the river through. And there are, specific to our people, a highly wired nervous system that is scared as can be, just scared as can be. And so going into these experiences is so scary for so many people. And also they're filled with anxiety because of the fear and trembling that have been the stories that we have been told that we need to be in fear and trembling. And we are. And so by their fruits ye shall know them. Well, we see a lot of anxiety. We see a lot of fear. We see a lot of shame is like what the fruits are that I see in some of that shadow spaces of this work and this people of high demand religions. Okay. So this intersection, why I see it being so lovely is because the conditioning is so deep when it's a high demand religion. Like, for example, let's just take one of the neural pathways that I would love to get a little magic on is this idea that the natural man is a enemy, shields up from the enemy of God. Okay. So that's a Book of Mormon reference. Okay. Right. Am I right about this? And it's a big scripture, mastery scripture that we needed to remember in the conditioning of our souls as Mormon people. And so that would be a conditioning that we say, oh, it's deeply rooted in there. That voice might be a mission president. It might be a mother or a father. It might be a church leader that in our souls is a really, really deeply rooted, conditioned belief, a story that's in us. And the reason why I think that psychedelics are such a lovely crossover is because, like Michael Pollan says, it creates new brain pathways like a fresh coat of snow over your head. And so it allows us to create the snow tracks of new pathways, new patterns that are different than the scary ones that are rooted in the natural man being an enemy of God. And so even just like one teaching to say, how do we get to the root of that? Well, psychedelics are a great way to just like get right into the root and to just look at it and not think of it as sin. Because what was that question originally? Like, how do you not think of doing these things as sin, right?
Dangerous, sinful, right? Because what you're talking about is we were programmed like choose the right. Well, it gets
The
confusing.
choice is placed before you.
Right.
Yes, we were.
Right, but what happens when right changes? When something like cannabis that was wrong, all of a sudden
Yes.
now in the state of Utah is legal medically.
Yes.
So is it right or is it
What?
wrong? What does that do to the dogma, you know?
And when you're a little scrupulous and you got that spicy flavor of scrupulosity in you and you're like, what do I do? What is the right way? Right? And so to be able to relax the nervous system a little bit, to be able to say, let's just see what your soul wants, you know? Like, I don't want to be the new authority. Genuinely, I don't want to be people's new authority to tell them what is true for them. I like to help them figure out what is true for them. And that's fun. And that's why I think psychedelics and high demand religion help in the reshaping of people being able to just get aligned to their own truth. And I really appreciate that. Okay, thanks. I'm going to stop there. I feel complete with my answer, but I could just keep talking forever. So let's say, is there any, Natasha, is there any other follow-up? Like, let's keep popcorning. Is there any other things you want to add?
Well, I do think, I mean, we've talked a lot about Mormonism, you
Yeah.
know, that is where the three of us come from, but I try to remember that there's other there's other
The
cultures.
evangelicals.
Yes,
we got
and I'm
Muslims, we
trying
got-
to think, like, because I lived in Wichita, Kansas for a long time, so I got very familiar with my evangelical, you know, and kind of Baptist neighbors and non-denominational Christians and all those folks. But I think what really has changed, and I don't think those of us coming from religion could have had this change without the authority of medical research and or government legality in order to be open to these things. I think the reason why bishops are now, some bishops are now open and saying, no, you're not necessarily breaking the word of wisdom, and I'm not going to take your temple recommend away, and I'm not going to do all that, is because there's some medical authority saying, hey, there is a medical reason for this. I don't know. In fact, I don't think that if somebody came in and just said, hey, I just want to go on a journey for the journey's sake, that a bishop would be like, that's a good idea. But if you're coming in and saying, you know, I'm dealing with, you know, resistant depression, treatment resistant depression, I have suicidal ideation, the bishop probably already knows and is worried about this person and how they're showing up, you know, and their affect. Then all of a sudden, this seems like a medical intervention. Now a bishop can be on board. And the reason I want to clarify that, bring attention to that, is that psychedelics didn't change. they didn't do something different in 1980 that they're doing now in 2025. We are changing our understanding and our ability to be open to something that sadly we've been missing out on for decades, especially with the backdrop of this being a Christian nation who colonized an indigenous people who were using these medicines for millennia prior to the white folks showing up with their, like I mentioned at the beginning, their ideas of this is the way to spiritual experience. And these plants and your ways are not okay and dangerous and sinful and all those things. So I do think that I think it's just good to sit with that why do we need this type of authority in order to give ourselves permission? Because even though we don't want to be an authority, I think who is an authority right now is the United States government and, medical institutions who are doing research on these things that we white people are like, okay, now it's legit. Now it's okay. Now it's legit.
Yeah.
And so that's just I guess I say that because I'm trying to invite everybody to just constantly be questioning all the systems we all come from, right? Like, why do we believe certain things? Why would it be a sin? And I think hopefully if you continue to follow this series, we're going to get way into explaining a lot of the ways these medicines work in our brains. And I also have to think that religion, oftentimes, for a long time, when you think about medical advances over the last 100 years, that is exponentially larger than the 5 bajillion years before that. And so for the 5 bajillion years before that, people did not have scientific reasoning to explain things that now we understand at a cellular level, or because we have microscopes, or because we have a lot of different understandings. And so there is still this wrestle between religion and medicine, right? Like, how did you explain a manic episode or a schizophrenic episode in the 1700s? Well, it was a demon that needed to be exorcised, right? And now we have medicines that can help a person who has schizophrenia lead fairly manageable, normal lives, right? And so I don't know why I'm on this soapbox, but
it's okay. I want to add something to it. I like this soapbox. I'm like, yes, because one of the things I want to say is that in the best part of seeing what happens for people that decide and to feel aligned to do these experiences, at many, many points through the years I've been doing this, people always are so surprised that sometimes they say, I can't believe this experience is illegal. Like, they have moments where they're like, why is this a Schedule I medicine? Why was the war on, why is this experience? Like, because it is so rooted in such a spirit that entheogens, did I say it right? Entheogens.
I know, yeah.
Okay, entheogens is a word that is basically like the mystical part of these medicines. The spiritual.
Like you kind of said that, okay.
I know, I don't say words right, and that's fine. I don't have to.
It's entheogen.
Entheogens.
So entheo means Greek. Entheo means divine or God. Entheo, God, divine. Gen means the root word for generate. So entheogen means generating the divine within.
Okay. Well, then I think that here we are at this word then. Okay.
I love your little thing too.
My wand. It's a wand that I got and I love it and I'm going to be with it because this is what I want to say. This word right here is such a beautiful word around the spirituality of these experiences, which most people that have been seeking religion and truth for their whole life, it does something in your psyche. It creates a certain way of being, and so what is so lovely is to watch people meet their soul, their spiritual part of themselves. And yes, there's shadow, and yes, there's light, and yes, there's all the things in between. But to have been told a story that these are dangerous and sinful and naughty, and we should be scared of them. And war and like the DARE program, which I grew up in with the 80s, like the police officers coming in and say, your friends are going to tempt you. They're going to say, do drugs. And I was like, oh, and then, oh, like here I am, that person now saying, you should try these things, you know? And so this, like, what do we do with the fact that we were told all these stories? And so I have been, for many years, embodied this experience that like, these were bad drugs, you know? And so that's why I like the other word, the entheogens. Entheogen, because of the fact that I think it brings a different kind of presence to what this is, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for me, over the years, I had to change my embodiment of what I felt about these also. Like, I think I've been very honest in here that like, I'm very, I like cannabis. I call myself a canisexual. One comment on Natasha's former podcast says, this so-called canisexual. And I said, that is right. Okay. So it's a made up word. And like, what do we do about that? Okay. But I am a big fan of cannabis to say, how do we use these medicines as lighting up our soul, lighting up my spiritual self, right? Which I was told that, no, I'm going to not feel the spirit if I'm breaking the word of wisdom. So to change the embodiment of how I personally felt and how I've had to work through my own cannabis shame, like as an adult, recreationally available in the state of Washington. And I had to literally work through the fact that I was going to be breaking the word of wisdom, even though I was 10 years out of the church, you know? So these things, these conditioning, these stories that we have been told stay with us for a long time. It's hard to face them, but we're also a seeking kind of people. So this is why I think the religious people are very interested in the magic mushrooms, you know? Like, isn't there a podcast called Mormons on Mushrooms?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel like maybe both of you have been on it, or maybe Aimee, you've been on it, but like,
I have not.
Well, maybe maybe Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds will go on Mormons with Mushrooms someday, and we'll be able to talk about some of these things. But I do feel passionately that the seeking elements of these kind of experiences really draw people from high demand religions, whether they are in it or whether they are out of it. I think that there's some appeal to it. So that's what that maybe the dangerous and sinful part is the appeal also. Okay. Natasha. Okay.
Comment. So Amber King says new imprint. So whoever said that, she's like saying that's right. Daphne Callison says my mother used cannabis while dealing with ALS, which I had to look up, and that's amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is a progressive neurodegenerative disease.
Lou Gehrig's disease also.
And it was the best decision we made. It helped her deal with anxiety, pain, nausea without any side effects.
Love to hear it. Love it for your mom.
Yes. Well, and here's what I also want to say.
Okay,
I'm just going to say it. Humans have been getting high since the beginning of time.
Yeah, they have.
Humans have been getting high since the beginning of time on all sorts of plants. And then when we could make them into chemicals, we were figuring them out. Like, this is a human thing. It is like in our bones. Like, we also are, we're made of chemicals and sacred molecules. We have DMT endogenously inside our bodies, right? Dopamine. People are getting high all the time on all sorts of different things. It's part of the human experience. And like, so is also seeking for spiritual experiences, right? People have been getting high and communing with whatever they call sacred, and with so many different, indigenous communities have been doing this since the dawn of time. Since there have been plants, people have been getting high. Let me just say that.
Well, in other words,
and fungus, we know it's like the oldest thing on the planet. Oh no, sorry, did I cut out?
A tiny bit, but I totally agree with that, because plants have existed supposedly before humans. Oh, and by the way, the jaguars are getting high too. Did you know that?
No, tell us about the jaguars.
Jaguars. I read somewhere. I forget where. I should remember where I read things so I can give correct information. But they're eating mushrooms that they know. They're actually going on journeys on purpose.
Yes.
The jaguars. Yeah.
A non-ordinary state. I mean, people do it with breath work. Let's be
Yep.
real. People do all sorts of different kinds of holotropic breath work to get a little high, to release that DMT, to have a visual experience. It's part of being human. But we have pushed it so far into the shadow and demonized it, right? When these molecules, these medicines, like this woman who commented, I forget her name, like her mother, it's been so helpful, so relieving, right? We need to change the way we relate to these sacred plants. I always
Yes.
say canna, mama canna, it's a sacred plant. It can
There
help
it
us
is.
with so many different things. And going back to that choose the right, I guess it was wrong and now it's very right.
Got so
It,
confusing
it
for
is.
like really scrupulous, like there's a right or a wrong kind of nervous systems.
Right, but if you're in pain and you actually go to a doctor, you can get a prescription for these medicines for pain,
I know.
right? Without a lot of side effects. There's hardly any side effects with canna,
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful
Yeah.
medicine too,
Yeah.
So I love to see that the tide is changing. I love to see that we are waking up. And, Ben Sessa has a whole book called The Psychedelic Renaissance. I mean, that's what they say we're in. Like, this is not new discoveries. What I will always say is science is always way behind Indigenous communities. We're finally barely rediscovering what Indigenous communities have known for literal thousands of years. So science always takes time to catch up. And I'm really glad that they've started studying these medicines again, molecules, because we really lost 50 years of research with the
Yeah.
war on drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I have a really long comment
Okay.
from Mark Stoddard. And yeah, he's going to say things that probably not everybody will agree with. And that's okay, because that's what we're here to talk about. And I'm by everybody, I mean people in the audience. Okay. Each of our personalities are unique. I think ultimately any therapist should be telling those that leave Mormonism and any high demand religion that it is okay to completely let go. Well, I'll just interrupt right there. We can tell people all day long. But just like prophets tell people what to do, people are not going to necessarily follow what therapists tell them what to do either, right? So I mean, this is kind of a personal journey. But yes, I agree that we're trying to normalize this. Anyway, key to this is recognizing and accepting that it's all fantasy and make-believe, literally. It's a fairy tale. So, he's obviously talking as somebody who's a non-believer. Best example of this is learning that Santa Claus was not real. I think we need to be careful with using mind-altering drugs for religious departure, which I used most of as a teenager, including LSD. Don't prescribe a fix for something that's not broken, or treat with a mind band-aid when none is needed. This is about repeating the good news. You are now in complete control and free. No such thing as sin. There's no evidence for the divine, none. When we let go, we set our own rules and limits, and these need not to be influenced by anything other than our own personal preferences. We change over time. I dug cannabis as a teenager. I don't now. My brain is different. I'm okay with myself and don't like not being in full control. Now, I do like a slight alcohol buzz and will occasionally drink, keep counseling simple. There's a lot there. I'm not sure I told, sometimes when people write, it's like I would ask 10 different questions to know exactly what they're meaning. But what are you gathering from that comment? I think there was some support and some not support mixed in.
Yeah. I would just say, I like his name was Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Her name was Mark. So it's like, hey, finding out what was true for Mark is very important in this. So I heard so many places where he knew what was true for him, like cannabis when he was a teen, not cannabis now. His brain is different. I'm like, yeah. I love that with his own authority, Mark is figuring out what is good for Mark. So go Mark is what I say to that. Right?
Yeah. Do you have any feedback?
Yes, I have a lot. So what I want to say here is that one of the things that psychedelics are actually really great for is changing our perspectives. And you're going to hear me talk probably, if we keep doing this podcast, a lot about perspective, because it's one perspective to say the divine isn't real, the sacred doesn't exist, Santa Claus isn't real. But I would like to push back on that a little bit, because Santa Claus may not be really real, but psychically real. Everybody knows about Santa Claus. So on some level, it's psychically real. It exists. It's a concept that we all believe in. So we can say, conceptually, Santa Claus is real, right? If we're looking at it through a psychological lens, okay?
Okay.
So the art of seeing, this is what I want to say. One thing I love about this conversation is, someone just throws out there, well, the divine isn't real. We have no evidence for it. I would hear these same kind of things when I was Mormon, right? Like, there's no evidence of, mother in heaven or the female divine. And then I often think about the art of seeing. Is there no evidence, or have we forgotten how to see? I feel like the feminine divine is right under earth, all around. Look at the mountains, like go to the ocean. Like, I don't know what is more sacred or divine, right? It's almost like in the way that we have been programmed to see. It's about our perspectives. Like, I love how he says, I love a little buzz. I love to get drunk here, there, like, right? What do we call alcohol? Spirits. Spirits. You're communing with this, with a spirit. The spirit of alcohol, the spirit of wine, right? It's doing what it's doing. You're having a good time with it, right? So I want to just push back a little and challenge that there's a lot of ways to see things, right? And perspective is important. And that's one of the reasons why I love psychedelics, because it shifts and kind of pressures our perspective sometimes. And maybe we need a little loosening up on things, right? So, and not to say that this is right and that's wrong, but just like, I think it's important in this conversation to always be pushing back that there's more than one way to see things.
Yeah. Well, and I love that because, and I think, as I've been, why did I get into psychedelics, right? Why did I become interested in this? Well, because probably starting 12 to 15 years ago, people who were leaving Mormonism or leaving high demand religion were seeking something else, some other perspective. And so I started hearing about people going to Costa Rica or California or wherever to have these journeys, whether with psilocybin or ayahuasca or whatever it is. And I started realizing, like, we have, like, I would say Mormonism. Let's just talk about Mormonism for a minute. So being a daughter of converts, and my mother being very Catholic, Protestant background, what I started realizing about Mormonism is that we're a very black and white religion, even more so than other high demand religions. Like Catholics, if I ask a Catholic, well, how do you make sense of this and this and this? They're very comfortable saying, it's a mystery, Natasha. We're not really supposed to know how that all works. And if you ask a Mormon, they're going to be like, well, in 1892, this particular person came down from this particular place and gave this particular, document to this particular it's a very literal religion. It's based on what Orthodox believers in the church feels like history, and so it's all like, it all has to fall into place. And I just don't think Mormons are very comfortable with mystery. So when they leave, typically they take that same black and whiteness that they found in religion, which is, of course, there's a God, and of course, there's evidence for a God, because there's evidence, as far as the Book of Mormon is evidence, right? The gold plates, even though we can't see them, are evidence. These reports from different people who saw different things, that's the evidence. And then they leave and they say, oh, that's no longer true. And because we don't have that same type of evidence for the divine or for anything mystical or spiritual out here in secular land either, then now it's all not true. Right? And there's no room for mystery. And it's very evidence-based and science-based, which granted, I love science-based and I love evidence-based, but I do like me some mystery. And I do like me some, what I would call spirituality, right? And some communing with whatever it is, the universe, a God, myself, nature, whatever it is that people want to commune with. And I think that's why these psychedelic journeys, when Mormons had so much relied on the spirit and the prophet and these particular rituals to get them a spiritual experience, now it's like, well, what about this medicine? And what about this science? Can that give me answers or evidence for something that I'm experiencing myself, right? So anyway, that's another tangent I went on, but
no, I think it's important because, hey, we all got to make sense of why we're on this floating or zooming rock through space. right? We've talked about that in past episodes of like the religio instinct is what Carl Jung called it. The religious instinct. We all have it inside of us. We all are curious seekers trying to understand what is going on in, on this planet. And whether we make sense of it through religion, whether we make sense of it through science, or we're making sense of it through nihilism, whatever it is, we're making sense of it somehow, right? And I agree, like there's some traditions, religious traditions, that are more black and white, like this is the answer and everything else is wrong. One thing I love about like Native American traditions, there's so many different tribes, there's so many different like beginning of the universe kind of stories, like how did we get here, right? And each tribe kind of respects the other's story. They're like, yeah. And it's not like ours is right and yours is wrong, and therefore you're not talking to the right God, right? It's like, no, each story about the universal beginning of all of this tells us something of the whole, tells us something of the mystery. No one story can tell the whole story. We need a lot of different myths and stories to help us kind of start to understand what is this big mystery. It can't be fit in a tiny box, So I just wanted to throw that in, kind of piggyback on what you were saying. I liked the tangent.
I like the tangent too, because we also think about how left brain and right brain, like this, like stories in that like right brain, right, of that creativity, like gather round, let us tell you the stories of our Joseph Smith children, like, and then the left brain of like following the rules and that there's a process and a way to do it. Like, I definitely think that people that come from religious backgrounds, and then you add on high demand family systems on top of that, and that combination together creates quite a cocktail of like highly wired, black and white, scrupulous, there's right ways, high judgment, high integrity, all of that kind of like thing. And moving into the right brain is fun and mystical and mysterious and dark and shadowy and like, ooh, children, come into the shadows of your psyche. You know what I mean? And so all of that demon, the witchcraft, that's where all of that is laid in religion, is that cautionary tale to not cross over into, right? And so it adds this wonderful protection from the shadow of not only self, but of the world. Think of how many messages that we got of like the world versus like the people of, the religion that you came from,
Yeah. Well, and I just want to put out there, like the last journey I went on, I felt like I had so many beautiful, wonderful insights that I now know to call personal revelation, right? Coming from my Mormon traditional, that's what I call personal revelation. And yet, I don't want to say this just because I want to normalize how tough this is. Like these things were very valuable to me, these insights. And yet there is this old voice of mine that's like, are you sure, Natasha, that that's valuable information? Are you sure that that's not drug induced? And are you sure, Natasha, that, or even when I think about sharing with somebody, that somebody wouldn't say, well, we can't trust that because you were high, you were high when you had those insights. And so as I've been experiencing those voices, those, little like nagging thoughts, which back in my more traditional Mormon days, I would have been taught to hear those doubts as the spirit, right? Telling me to be aware and to not pay attention to this other thing that didn't fit my religious narrative at the time and the religious authority at the time. And so now I know better intellectually, but there's still this percolation that's happening within my system as I practice giving myself authority and giving these medicines authority and giving my psyche authority, because that's really what we're tapping into, that I notice the remnants and how difficult it is. Like I think of myself, how much training I've done, how much studying I've done, how much, conversations I've had with colleagues, research papers I've read around this. So you'd think that it would be super easy for me to dive right in and do this work. And then I think of all the people who trust us or others to do this kind of work who don't have that same practice that I do of at least intellectually changing my mind.
Yeah.
I'm imagining this is pretty hard for people. It's pretty hard for people to trust something that has been so demonized, that has been so cinifized, that
Yeah.
has been so weaponized. And I think especially weaponized against Indigenous brown people from this, from these lands. We know cannabis has a huge history, for example, right? That's a great way brown people got arrested. And contained, in some really racially profiling ways. There's a racially profiling story behind a lot of this as well. And so I just want to say that and name that, because this is to reframe something, to give something new possibility when you've been told, if you do that, you are potentially harming your ability to salvage yourself, right? Like salvation is at stake.
Yeah,
I know.
That is hard rewiring.
I know.
It really is. It really is. And one thing I want to piggyback on that is, so something I see hands down all the time in my practice is from those who have already left high demand religion. Okay. So moving away from like people who are still in high demand religion. What I see a lot of is this war, right? With having been raised in high demand religion, I always say you kind of get hardwired to be externally referenced. And it's even harder when you grow up in a family that values high expectations. We expect you to be a certain way, right? So we grew up in Mormonism, we'll just say easily, but we could use any religion, right? You want to please your parents, of course, that's just a human thing, but also now you got to please the bishop, you got to please the stake president, definitely got to please God, right? Choose the right. This whole thing is like, it's all out there. And even, I know that, we can talk about, there's lots of different perspectives even about, the Holy Ghost, but once you've left high demand religion, you say you no longer believe in that. Holy Ghost was external too, I guess, and now you don't have it. It's like, so much of the work that I see is people needing to go from externally referenced back home to internally referenced. Okay, I get that the church says this about this thing, but what do I believe? What does my soul say about this thing?
Yep.
And then what happens when what soul says is different than what God says, or the dogma of the church, the scripture says, or even worse, I see this all the time, not worse, maybe better, I don't know what the right word is, when soul goes even against what is culturally accepted, or what is like what we value as a culture, right? This is like human soul psyche stuff, when we have to say, wait, I've lived my life trying to please others in this external way. It's time to come home to myself and be internally referenced. What are my own values? What are my principles? How do I want to live a life where I can lay my head on my pillow and say, I showed up with integrity, I tried to be a good human, kind to people, right? And I think that's something I see a lot in psychedelics, and this overlap of psychedelics and high demand religion. And what you're talking about is like, trying to figure out, where does all of this fit? And it's a huge issue that I see that people are really working hard on, but it's something that should be intentionally worked on, right? Is how do we come back home to ourselves in this work?
Beautiful.
I love that so much. All right, maybe we'll do one last thing and then we'll close up. So we're preparing to present. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so anytime you're presenting, you're researching on what the current research says. So I came across this article in the, American Psychological Association space. And it's called How Psychedelic Experiences Can Cause, Worsen, or Resolve Spiritual Struggles, a mixed methods study of psychedelic users. And I don't have access to the whole article. I have access to the abstract, but I thought I'd read through this because I thought this had some interesting insights that maybe apply to what we're talking about tonight. So, how do psychedelic experiences affect spiritual struggles? Dun, dun, dun. All right, so we examined this question through 3 linked surveys. Let's see, I don't want to read all of this. Those reporting, okay, in study 1, psychedelics most strongly affected ultimate meaning struggles. So this kind of hits with a lot of what Aimee, Rossi, you've been talking about, right? Like we all are looking for meaning in life. We know through 500 bajillion psychological studies that meaning in life matters, that it has a lot to do with people's well-being. And I think it does, Aimee, have, because we've worked so much around religious trauma, we can see this, that when high demand religion, which does an amazing job of telling you exactly what meaning of life is about, and then when you lose that and you're having to restructure that, that is oftentimes what's called the dark night of the soul, right? Because that is difficult work. Yeah. So they're saying it strongly affected ultimate meaning struggles, whether causing or resolving them. And this is where I would say, if you are a believer, and especially maybe an Orthodox believer, where your ideas about spirituality are in this box, that's the only thing that can do, and you go on a psychedelic journey of some sort, and all of a sudden your mind expands past that particular box, which is oftentimes what psychedelics invite you to look at, that can cause a bit of a struggle, right? Because now, and I want to remember too, that struggle doesn't mean bad, right? Struggle is what we're all doing in the ultimate journey to growth and development. It is a struggle to grow and develop. So that can cause a faith questioning or resolving them. And this is where I see so much healing in religious trauma work, where people have already left that rigid box behind in some ways and are inviting that expansion. But so much of the ways we've been set to think are so stuck that it's hard to access other aspects of ourselves. And so I think that's what the resolving is. Okay, so participants who were younger and more religious reported more effects of psychedelics on spiritual struggles, both resolution and causation. Struggle resolution was linked with more psychedelic use and positive psychedelic experiences and attitudes. So the more people used these medicines and the more positive an experience they had, that was helpful. Struggle causation, so now if it's starting to cause a problem, was related to Christian identification, which is kind of what I just said. That's a box, right? And it's inviting you past that box. Negative psychedelic experiences and attitudes, meaning something went wrong or was difficult during that journey. And concern about demonic involvement. This is kind of like, as a sex therapist, I'm like, the number one way you're going to mess up your sex life is to think that there's something fucked up about your sexuality, right? So if you think, oh my gosh, the reason if I want to orgasm, or if I want to be sexy or slutty or, whatever it is, like provocative with my partner, for example, that means I have an evil spirit within, that's going to cause a problem. You're coming into psychedelic work thinking, oh no, am I going to be demonically possessed? Yeah. This is why I don't blame the psychedelics on this. I blame the thinking. If you come in with certain thinking, it's going to have a problem. Anyway, follow-up surveys showed that relatives to struggle causation cases, struggle resolution cases included more mystical elements, fewer challenging experiences, more spiritual growth, and less spiritual decline. So that means that when people were able to, welcome mystical elements, they had less challenging experiences, they actually reported more spiritual growth. Yeah. So that's, in a sense, it says psychedelics worsened struggles through challenges to religious beliefs, increased distress, disturbing entity encounters, detachment, moral dilemmas, and being forced to confront unsettling thoughts or feelings. How many of us in Mormonism had a difficult time confronting unsettling thoughts or feelings? The psychedelics can also resolve all of those things. So a really interesting study. I'm going to see if I can get the whole thing. any thoughts about all of that?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, so I can get you the full access if you want, school, I have access.
Yeah. You get
the whole thing. But the first thing that comes up for me is, yeah. Science is finally catching up what people who have been in this field and indigenous communities have known for literally thousands of years, right? So yeah, part of Aimee Huff mentioned this earlier, that part of what these medicines can do is they can put you more in toward, they quiet down the default mode network, the neuroplasticity fires and wires, and what happens is these parts of our brain are firing and wiring that normally are not online all the time. That is often the right side of the brain, this big picture, right? So of course, when somebody comes in and they have one way of thinking about the world, and now they get the big picture, of course, that can either cause positive increases in the way that you view yourself and your religious nature, or negative, because all of a sudden you're like, wow, things are much bigger than I thought. Or you may come away and go, wow, things are much bigger than I thought, like how we relate to these things. And this is why I think it's so important to have somebody that has a depth psychological orientation when doing this kind of work, because you have to understand, or one thing I would like to offer is that the language of the psyche is metaphor, image, and symbol. You will hear me say that a lot. Demons as a metaphor. We need to be looking at demons as a metaphor. Yes, they're psychically real, but like we all have demons. We all have things we don't want to look at, right? We all have things that people with eating disorders, yeah, they would say, I literally have something inside me that makes me not eat. And I want to eat, but I can't because the thing won't let me. Or I don't want to purge, but the thing makes me, right? Like I want
or
us
the
to
thing makes me look at porn and touch my penis. Like
exactly.
Yes.
Right. I want us to open up this idea that if a demon comes up if you're working with these medicines, we always say in the field, like, have tea with your demon. Let's sit down and relate to it. This is the demon is a metaphor for a part of ourselves that we don't want to look at, that we don't want to see, that we're maybe afraid to see. And so, yeah, I can get how that would be destabilizing for people, but also with a informed guide that kind of understands the language of the psyche, it might be a way for you to come into deeper sense of wholeness with your inner self, a part of ourself that we've pushed into the shadow and do not want to have a relationship with. But the reason it's coming up and knocking on our door is it's saying it's time to have a relationship. Let's look at these things, right? So anyway, that's what I wanted to throw out there. Aim, what do you think?
I mean, yes, to all of it, That's what I want to say. Yes to all of it. I think it is a dilemma that I have had in my whole career of like saying, what are we going to do with this situation that we have in front of us, right? And I don't need to get on my little cry soapbox, but I can sometimes, but I won't tonight. But there is a wound with people that is specific to high demand religions and high demand families and what that shakes out for people's things. And then you think, how are we going to help? How are we going to help? How are we going to help? And I don't think that psychedelics is the only way to help. Like, I want to be very clear about that. And I don't think it's for everybody. I also want to be very clear about that too. Okay. But for some people that want and feel aligned to it, that want to shake up some of that rigid beliefs, core beliefs about themselves, this helps activate the like, ooh, and sometimes it's scary to meet your demon shadow and have to have some tea with it. I would say take a hit of pot with it. Like it's scary to have to be with the parts of yourself that you have wanted to ignore and that you put into if this is like, we're going to compare, the home of your own belonging, and there's like little closets that you like stuff all your shit in, and you close the door and you're like, I don't want to, that's going to take me too long to clean up all that and reorganize that. It's like, I'm just going to keep it in there. And so these experiences activate that. And so sometimes you have to meet like this really scary parts of yourself that feel demon-y, and
I love new language.
It's a word. See, I make up words, and see, this is why but demon-y, it's a word from Aimee Huff, is that those parts of ourselves and this is beautiful because if we have internal family systems, which is a therapeutic model, which is saying basically we have a lot of different parts of ourselves and how do we integrate them all together. I think this is like part of that is saying, how do I take that part of myself that I used to believe was sin? Like literally they told me that part was a sin. And I have like been like, oh, I don't want to pretend that part is part of me. And like, I don't like that part of me. So I'm just not going to meet it. But then you do have to meet those parts that you thought were sin and that you thought were taboo part of you and that you're going to put away, never have to visit. And so the yes to all of the research And yes, to all the mystical and the yum science of like what it does to our brain and how it creates all that flexible soul space. It's so fun. So I think it's fun.
Yeah, and
And
I want to say, oh, go ahead, Aim. Sorry.
no, I was just like, yeah, let's roll. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I'm grateful. I don't want to be like, dogging on science because I'm glad that science is catching up. I'm glad that science are now, they can now study these and we can find out what we've known, right? It's important to, because we value science in this culture, in this Western culture, we value science, right? And from a depth psychological perspective, and you'll hear me say this a lot too, the psyche's telos, or the psyche's goal from a depth psychological perspective, is wholeness. Wholeness, which is different than like high demand religion. Their goal is often perfection. And we need to differentiate perfection from wholeness because in a high demand religion, we say the devil is bad, God's good, and we project them outward. But the psyche doesn't really, the psyche is amoral from a depth psychological perspective. It's trying to move you into wholeness. That's what it's trying to do. And so that means coming into relationship with the parts of ourselves that we other, which is the opposite of perfection. Perfection's only going to be right and good and righteous and light, right? Which is different. So when people should know that when they come into working with these medicines, whether you're in a high demand religion or you're post high demand religion, the psyche, when you're using something like a psychedelic, which is again different than entheogen, same substance but different word, still psychedelic is soul delos manifesting, soul manifesting medicines. These are not only going to manifest the light and the love and the like what we would deem positive aspects of the psyche. These can also manifest or amplify, stimulate the shadow sides of the psyche, or what we deem shadow, right? I mean, I really think it's all gold down there, but sometimes it's hard to look at still.
Yeah. Well, I have loved this conversation that came from one flipping question about why people think psychedelics might be sinful.
Yeah.
So you can see how we digress.
Yeah, we're all over.
Which is why we wanted to do this podcast, because we just love talking about all this stuff. So we figured if anybody's interested in listening to three people just, I don't know, pontificate, then here we are.
Got things to say.
We have things to say about this. Okay, really fast. I want to announce that this Friday at noon, today is what? Wednesday. So 2 days from now at noon, we are going to be, the three of us are going to be presenting a 1 hour CE on psychedelic-assisted therapy. In particular, I mean, I'll get the whole title here. Sacred disruption, which I love our term for that. Psychedelic-assisted therapy within high-demand religious contexts of sexual and religious trauma. So that intersection, again, of sexuality, whether it's physical sexual trauma or purity culture, psychological sexual trauma, religious trauma, and psychedelics, that is our jam. That's what the three of us are all about. And so, we are. And if anybody wants to look at us on YouTube, we're much funner.
Yeah.
No funner.
Yeah, we're live. We're active listeners. All of us.
We are like dancing.
We have loud faces.
It's fun to watch us if you get into that kind of thing. Anyway, so we're doing a 1 hour CE on that. Although it's meant for mental health professionals, it is going to be fairly basic, and we invite anybody to attend. It's free. It's 1 hour. I think it would be a good overview for folks who are thinking about potentially going on some type of journey. Here in Utah, we have cannabis that's legal. We have ketamine that's legal. There are some spaces that are doing MDMA and psilocybin, but usually it's hospital clinical settings that are doing studies. If you're in other states, there's other types of options that may be available to you. But if you're interested in learning about these intersections, I think this would be a great introduction. So I put the link in the comment section. Make sure to go register. You do have to register to get the link, even though it's free. And then November 7th from 9 a.m. to noon, we are doing a much deeper dive. We're going to do a 3 hour CE. This will not be free because as we were looking at our 1 hour, we're like, oh, there's so much. There's so much we want to cover. So,
us 3 to 1 hour. Come on,
we're going to triple the information on that. And then, of course, we have ideas for further trainings down the road as well. But we believe that this is, we're hearing it. I've been hearing this in many of my kind of psychological spaces where I go to associations or conferences where psychedelics are really kind of the future of mental health. And I think most of us who are in the mental health field, it would be good process to start, learning and getting involved with how these medicines can help our clients. And they can facilitate all the different types of modalities that we study. And so we encourage you to come. So come to learnreligiontherapy.com is my platform that I've created under the Buehler Institute. Thank you to Dr. Stephanie Buehler, who has allowed me to do that. And it's APA accredited. It's hopefully really good information for you. And if you get on my mailing list, you'll get information about all the other trainings we plan to do in the future. So anything else either one of you want to say about anything of that nature?
Well, just that, and if you're a therapist or you're somebody that holds space a lot, this is going to be a really valuable CE for you to be able to just get ideas on how to better support your clients. And so we're interesting on a lot of fun, so we would love you to join.
Or at least we think so.
At least we're biasly thinking that. So, but I remember the times when I was always looking for the CEs and I was like, which ones are going to be fun? I wanted it to be worth my time. And I'm just saying, I think it might be worth your time.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. And then along with that, I will say, so it's live, but we're also recording it. So if you can't attend live, still register and then you'll get a link to the recording down the road. So when that's made available. Thank you, Aimee Rossi. Thank you, Aimee Heff.
Thank you, Natasha.
It was wonderful. And we will say goodbye until the next time we converge. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Naho tishki say the Navajo, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. 10,000 years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Naho tishki say the Navajo, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. sleep in our cities. We sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. No tishki so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland.